This is the most controversial stair that's in the United States right now. In fact, it would be completely illegal to build today, but many jurisdictions are looking to change that, and they believe bringing it back will unlock a wave of construction, specifically the kinds of buildings that will ease the housing crisis. And those opposed believe its legalization is one step closer to bringing back tenements, dense fire traps that leave entire neighborhoods vulnerable to danger and exploitation. So what makes this stair so powerful that it can change neighborhoods? And how has it become so politically charged that the governor of Illinois would stop by to discuss why the state wants to protect it from any laws or codes that might ban it?
Sometimes there are regulations that are put in that have good purpose behind them, but practically speaking, they really prevent any real development.
This is the stair of a point-access block, and this is what those stairs look like, a stairwell with the apartment doors right off the landings. The block refers to the building shape, and the point access describes the single primary entry point of the building. This entry connects directly to a stair, likely an elevator if it was built more recently. Those form a core that extend upward, connecting directly to units or apartments on each floor. And these days, this arrangement is only legal if the building is 3 stories tall or below. Above that, and a set of codes kick in that demand a different setup. That rule came about in 1946 when a fire on the 3rd floor of a hotel filled the building's entire stair with smoke, thwarting any attempts to escape from the 12 remaining stories above. If that stairway was enclosed with fire-resistant materials, the smoke would never have been able to get in. And if there were 2 stairs instead of 1, the other could have picked up the slack if it did. So this became the rule: 2 enclosed stairways for any residential structure above 3 stories. But the point access block is not unique just because it has 1 less stair than the required design. It's more about what happens elsewhere when that second stair is removed. Without it, you eliminate the need for a hallway. The pathway for connecting the usual 2 stairs naturally forms a lineup of units, each one arranged as a narrow strip that stretches between the hallway and the building facade where the units can reach out for light and air. By contrast, units in a PAB likely have 2 sides with windows. Not only is this good for daylight and airflow, it makes having 3 or 4 bedroom apartments a lot easier too. Since each bedroom itself needs a window access, 2 sides with windows makes arranging them simple and efficient. While all these benefits are nice, they don't necessarily point to why this stair is so important that it can impact an entire neighborhood. For that, let's compare the development of a neighborhood where PABs were prohibited and one where it wasn't. This is Lincoln Park. This neighborhood was annexed to the city of Chicago around 1900 when streetcars connected it with the loop to the south. 90% of its original working-class households lived in buildings that were more than 1 family, so only 10% lived in single-family homes. That 90% lived in a variety of buildings, from 2 to 3 flats to larger walk-ups and the popular courtyard-style building. All of these relied on a single-stair arrangement to work. Even the courtyard building are just a few PABs stuck together with entrances that face inward. But by 1946, when that new code was adopted, these structures were 40 years old and they were completely falling apart. So as investors began looking for opportunities to redevelop the area, there was a problem. The added expense of the second stair, combined with the hallway arrangement it required and everything else, meant that the only way to make finances work for the new buildings was to add more units. So the developments that snuck in around this time, they look like this: towers. If newly constructed units were going to be affordable at all, large developments like this became the only way forward. And some building types, like the courtyard arrangement, they're not even possible at all. So instead of building new here, developers and residents focused almost exclusively on renovating the buildings that were already there. And in some ways, that's great. It meant saving many of the historical structures. But these buildings, they already had people living in them, and they had to be removed before any renovation could happen. Also, any smaller, affordable units in these buildings were more profitable when combined to form larger, more luxurious units. The result? Lots of older, small buildings with large units. So that's an example where PABs were banned. But if we shift over to the Capitol Hill neighborhood of Seattle, they took a different path. Even though at first they started out in very similar ways. They too developed around 1900 with mostly multifamily housing. Then the same kind of restrictions actually took effect in 1946 as they did in Lincoln Park, and the large developments started creeping in along the edges of the neighborhood. However, in the 1970s, city officials did something unique in the wake of a national housing crisis. They observed that individual lots and small clusters were still sitting empty, despite the overwhelming need for more housing. So they amended their building code, section 1006.3.3, which allows PAB residential buildings up to 6 stories instead of 3. This gave developers the opportunity to work with smaller parcels, while at the same time developing in a way that's consistent with the existing fabric. This eased the pressure on the smaller buildings, so not all of them would be turned into luxury houses. Affordable units could exist in either a new or an old building here, contributing to maintaining a wide range of units within a wide range of building sizes. Today, both of these neighborhoods are really expensive to live in. I mean, they're both just nice places to be. But the critical difference is that Capitol Hill, as a single neighborhood, has a mixture of buildings, mixture of people, and incomes within it, while Lincoln Park does not. Capitol Hill also has a demographic makeup that reflects the rest of the city. Lincoln Park does not. That's because Lincoln Park displaced those that used to live here during the renovation process. And they never replaced the kinds of housing here that those people could afford. Instead, they moved to other areas of the city where the new, larger, affordable buildings were designated to go. And the city grew unevenly, and this causes enormous problems that we're all pretty familiar with today. Now, I know all of this is not caused just by this stair exactly, but this stair is at the center of heated debates that are going on right now for how it contributes to these large-scale housing and neighborhood issues. Many believe that the rule that makes this stair illegal should be overturned. Bringing it back, though, means going against the recommendation of the predominant building code that's used across the United States, the International Building Code, or IBC. But how could politicians or housing advocates claim to know more about building safety than the code? Well, it turns out that the code is not quite as smart as we might want it to be.
Each of the things that we proposed has a lot of study behind, is there any safety diminishment that occurs as a result of perhaps making it a little bit easier? And the answer with regard to the stairs particularly is, turns out there was an overabundance of caution about stairs, but the reality is that the fire safety professionals, the people who live and breathe that industry, people who really understand the challenges of, fighting fires, getting people out safely, and so on, have determined, actually, we don't need this heavier regulation.
Since that 1946 hotel fire, there have been all kinds of innovation in the construction industry. For instance, sprinklers. Before that hotel fire spurred the two-stair requirement, sprinklers weren't common in residential buildings. And studies show that they reduce the risk of death by 80 to 90%. Despite that, the code hasn't relaxed in proportion with the effectiveness of new technology. That hardly ever happens. It just seems irresponsible to reverse rules that keep people more safe. So the code ends up getting more and more restrictive over time, tightening, like a ratchet, the kinds of buildings that are possible to construct. So places that need more housing, they're not trying to convince the International Code Council to relax their standards. Instead, they're trying to write legislation that slices right through the aspects they believe isn't working for them anymore. In the Capitol Hill neighborhood, that was the city of Seattle's government that enacted legislation that allowed the neighborhood to grow evenly. But today, cities don't necessarily have the infrastructure that will help solve these issues themselves.
I think if you talk to most mayors and city councils, they would say, we'd love to have more housing. But then they trip over themselves because of the regulations that they've got in place that no one's willing to do anything about because they're buried under 7 other regulations. And it's like, we've always done it this way. We'll just always keep doing it this way.
That's why the issue is often taken up at the state level. 19 states across the United States have introduced or passed building code reforms legalizing single-stair apartment buildings. Here in Illinois, we have one too. It's Bill SB 4061. While the stair helps explain the issues in places like Lincoln Park, it's just one neighborhood in a city of 77 neighborhoods in a state with hundreds of municipalities. And most of them, they need housing too, not necessarily the point access block kind. It turns out that there are a number of rules on the books that work just like the stair. It includes things like zoning laws that restrict every lot to having one house, or requirements that every unit in a development have 2 parking spaces, or complicated permitting processes.
Getting a permit can differ from, it might take you 3 years in one place, and it might take you a week in another.
All of these rules are implemented by cities. And they're the levers that cities use to control how their neighborhoods develop. In that sense, the stair is pretty unique. Building code is rarely such a charged topic, but it's also the perfect place to observe how a system that's developed for one thing, in this case safety, has unpredictable consequences in other unexpected areas.
So the stair is a good example of one of those, limitations that is unnecessary, or that, if we just put a few rules around it to limit its effect, you could have more homes available.
When a city makes small apartment buildings illegal or financially impossible, development doesn't just stop. It just narrows the options. It turns old buildings into luxuries and pushes affordable, even middle-income housing into large projects. Family-sized apartments, they become harder to find, and mixed neighborhoods turn into places that look preserved but don't fully function below the skin. So that's why this tiny piece of building code has become so politically charged. It confronts cities with the fact that the rules that are meant to protect neighborhoods aren't really protecting them anymore, or at least they're not protecting them from what they originally intended them to. The stair took 80 years to reveal what it would do to our neighborhoods, but we don't have to wait that long to see the pattern play out again. It's unfolding right now with AI data centers, whose rules are being written as we speak. I have some thoughts about that, and I outlined it in a video that's currently only available on Nebula, the streaming platform that's built and owned by us creators. It's also where you'll find an extended interview of Governor Pritzker, who shared a lot more insight into housing and state government than we could fit into this video. Nebula is where 200 like-minded creators pool our resources to build our ideal viewing experience for you, our viewers and supporters. That also means access to the best, most thoughtful, exclusive content out there. After watching our visit to an old steel mill to find better designs for AI data centers, you might make your way over to the Nebula Original Series Day Pass, where Jason from Not Just Bikes navigates public transit networks of the world's best cities. So follow the link on the screen or in the description to start that journey. It's an incredible bargain at $2.50 per month when you sign up for a year of Nebula using my link. That's 50% off of the regular price. And if you really love it, you can pay once and get access to everything for the rest of your life. And if you're already signed up, firstly, thank you. We also have gift cards for sharing. Every engagement goes directly to helping our channel to bring you these deep dives into the built environment that we both love. So see you over there.